The flight attendant's laughter froze the second a tall man in a charcoal suit stepped onto the plane, a small metal badge on his lapel catching the light. The words, Chief Executive Officer, gleamed in silver, and suddenly the snickers died in their throats. Just hours before, they'd mocked his wife's handbag, whispering loud enough for passengers to hear that it looked like a knockoff. Now they stood stiff as statues, unsure if they should smile or hide. That man wasn't here for the free champagne or special treatment, he was here for justice, and you could feel the tension crackling in the cabin like static before a storm. Her name was Layla Monroe, and if you saw her walking through Atlanta International that morning, you'd know she was someone important, even if you didn't recognize her face. She was 35, a neurosurgeon who'd climbed every ladder with grit and brilliance, one of only a handful of black women in the country holding her title. Layla was flying to Los Angeles to present life-changing research, something she'd spent years perfecting. She wore a simple blazer, her curls pinned neatly back, and carried one small burgundy handbag. It wasn't just any handbag. It was a birthday gift from her husband, Elijah, the kind of bag you buy once in your life, a symbol of years of hard work. But to the woman behind the check-in counter, Layla didn't look like she belonged. The agent glanced at her ticket, then back at her face and asked, "Ma'am, are you sure you're in the right line? This counter is for first-class passengers." Layla forced a polite smile. "Yes, I'm flying first class to LA. My ticket is fully paid." The woman studied her ID like it might be fake, then said with a smile that didn't touch her eyes, "Of course, ma'am." Gate 18. Layla walked away, heels clicking on the polished floor, her stomach sinking. She'd learned to pick her battles, but every encounter like this chipped away at her. By the time she got to security, things got worse. She was randomly selected for extra screening again. An agent rifled through her carefully packed carry-on, lifting her presentation notes and undergarments in front of strangers like they were contraband. Layla kept her face, neutral hands clasped in front of her, but her heart pounded with embarrassment. When she reached the gate, boarding had begun. Two flight attendants stood at the podium, a blonde woman named Karen and a tall man named Mike. Layla handed over her boarding pass. Karen's lips curled into a smirk as she whispered to Mike, "That's just like the bag I saw at a street market." Mike chuckled. Totally fake. Some people try way too hard to look rich. Layla's jaw tightened. She'd spent years perfecting the art of silence, how not to flinch, not to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Karen scanned her pass and said sweetly, "Enjoy your flight." But as Layla walked toward the jet bridge, Karen's voice rose. "It's just sad when people try to play dress-up like that." Passengers turned their heads. The humiliation burned hotter than any insult she'd heard in years, but she kept walking, clutching her bag like armor. Inside the plane, Mike stopped her. "Boarding pass again, please." He hadn't asked anyone else. Layla handed it over without a word. He looked her up and down. "First class. You sure this is the right ticket?" "Yes," she said calmly, even though her blood boiled. Mike finally stepped aside, muttering something about security protocols. She sat down in her leather seat, her hands trembling slightly. She'd been through worse, she told herself. She'd been mistaken for a janitor in a hospital she ran surgeries in, been told by patients they'd wait for the real doctor, been ignored in real estate offices, even when she had the highest offer in hand. Each insult felt like a paper cut, tiny but deep, until they became 1,000 invisible scars. The attendant's hostility didn't stop there. Karen skipped her when offering pre-flight drinks, then spilled a full glass of water on her bag, feigning surprise. "Oh, I'm just so clumsy today," she said, handing Layla a single napkin. "Hope it's not ruined, though. I'm sure it's replaceable." Layla swallowed her anger. She couldn't afford to be that angry black woman. She wiped her bag with the flimsy napkin, pretending she didn't hear Karen snicker. A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. "Do you need more napkins?" Layla turned to see a young woman with auburn hair leaning over from the next row. She handed Layla a small pack of tissues. "That was out of line," the woman said. "I'm Sophie. I'm studying civil rights law." "Do you mind if I sit here?" Karen overheard, but couldn't find a reason to deny it. Sophie moved to Layla's row and whispered, "I hate people like that. I'm sorry you're dealing with this." Layla felt a rush of unexpected gratitude. For once, she wasn't alone. But the attendants weren't finished. Mike came back eyeing Layla's bag again. I need to check if that fits under the seat. Safety regulations. Sophie's eyes narrowed. You didn't check anyone else's. This feels like harassment. Should I start documenting this? Mike froze, his confidence faltering, and walked away without a word. Layla exhaled slowly, whispering, "Thank you." Then her phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message was simple. Stay calm. Justice is boarding now. Before she could process it, movement at the front of the plane caught her eye. A tall man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped through the cabin door, his CEO badge gleaming. Elijah Monroe, her husband. Passengers murmured, cameras quietly lifted, the crew stiffened. Karen rushed forward, all fake cheer. "Mr. Monroe, what an honor to have you on board." If we'd known, Elijah didn't even glance at her. He walked straight down the aisle, his expression calm but icy. Mike stepped forward, forcing a smile. "Sir, welcome aboard. Is there anything we can?" Elijah passed without answering, stopping only when he reached Layla. He leaned down and kissed her cheek. "Surprise, sweetheart. My meeting's wrapped early. Thought I'd join you." Karen and Mike looked like they'd swallowed nails. Sophie stared wide-eyed as Layla whispered, "What are you doing?" "Fixing something that should have been fixed a long time ago," Elijah said softly. He turned, scanning the cabin. "Captain, may I borrow your crew for a moment?" Minutes later, the galley at the front of the plane felt smaller than a closet. Karen and Mike stood pale and trembling as Elijah played security footage from the gate, their mocking laughter and comments on full display. "I have 3 passenger statements," Elijah said evenly. "And this video. I'd like you to explain why my wife, a world-renowned neurosurgeon, was treated like she didn't belong here." Karen's lips trembled. "Sir, it wasn't about race. It was just..." Then what was it about Elijah's tone was calm, but razor sharp? Why would you mock her bag? Why question her ticket? Why humiliate her in front of strangers? Mike opened his mouth, then closed it. No answer. Intentions don't matter nearly as much as impact. Elijah continued, "And the impact is clear. Here are your choices. Leave this plane now and I'll bring in replacements. Or stay, finish this flight and face a full investigation when we land. Your careers will likely end either way. Choose." The crew exchanged terrified glances. "We'll stay," Mike said hoarsely. Karen nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Then you'll treat every passenger with respect," Elijah said. "One wrong move and I'll personally make sure you never work in this industry again." When they stepped out of the galley, passengers whispered, phones discreetly recording. Karen and Mike moved through the cabin like ghosts, their arrogance gone. 10 minutes later, 2 new attendants boarded the plane, taking over their duties, while Karen and Mike sat stiffly in jump seats, humiliated under the gaze of every passenger. Sophie's fingers flew over her phone, tweeting, "Just watched airline staff mock a black woman, only to find out she's the CEO's wife. Justice is happening in real time." By the time they took off, the post had gone viral. Layla sat in her seat, torn between relief and discomfort. She leaned toward Elijah. "Now what? I don't want to be a headline." He squeezed her hand. "Maybe being a headline changes more than just today." By the time they landed in Los Angeles, reporters were waiting. The story had exploded online, dubbed CEO Justice. Articles praised Elijah's intervention, but Layla felt uneasy. Would she always be known as the woman from that viral flight? Months passed, and the fallout was intense. Elijah faced pushback from some board members who said he'd made a spectacle. But he pushed harder, implementing mandatory anti-bias training, tying employee bonuses to service quality, and creating a remediation program for staff willing to change. Layla helped design it, using her own experiences to make it authentic. 6 months later, she stood on stage at Skystream Airlines headquarters, speaking to hundreds of employees. She wasn't just Dr. Layla Monroe, neurosurgeon. She was someone whose quiet pain had sparked systemic change. In the crowd, she spotted Karen, now part of the program. Karen approached her afterward, eyes sincere. "You could have ruined me. Instead, you gave me a chance to learn. Thank you." Not every story ended that way. Mike quit bitter and unrepentant, but others changed. Sophie joined the company's legal team, helping rewrite policies to protect passengers. And Layla, she realized that her silence all those years hadn't been strength, it had been survival. Now she had power, and she intended to use it. One evening, Elijah handed her a small box. Inside was a tiny replica of that burgundy handbag made from a still frame of the security footage. A reminder, he said, that courage can turn humiliation into transformation. Layla placed it on her desk as a symbol. The real bag sat beside her chair, no longer a reminder of pain, but proof of resilience. Some passengers from that flight still tell the story. They talk about the day a CEO turned a plane into a courtroom when quiet injustice was met with loud accountability. But Layla knows this fight isn't over. One viral moment won't erase centuries of bias, won't protect every traveler. What it can do is start a conversation. So tell me, if you'd been on that flight, would you have spoken up like Sophie? Should Elijah have stayed silent and handled it privately? Or was public accountability the only way to make change? Drop your thoughts below. Share your own stories, because every voice matters. And maybe one day, stories like this won't be newsworthy at all. They'll just be history.